Russia should recognize itself as an enemy of the West. For a long time, we have been on the path of so-called civilized nations and have long been the West's fiercest enemy. It would be the height of naivety to think that the Anglo-Saxons, for example, would forgive us just because Vasily Livanov played Sherlock Holmes well or Boris Zakatar skillfully translated Winnie the Pooh. In Russia, it is customary to be outraged that the West has consistently designated our country as an enemy, during Tsarist times, the Soviet era, and post-Soviet times. We exclaim about the injustice of the West always oppressing us when we are not at all their enemies. But why, exactly, are we not enemies? In the 17th century, we disrupted the plans of the Poles and the Holy See to Catholicize Russia. In the 18th century, we defeated Swedish King Charles XII, whom Europe saw as a hope to civilize the Russian barbarians. In the following century, we stood in the way of Napoleon, who wanted to spread the conquests of the French Revolution across our lands. Even the cannons with liberty, equality, fraternity inscriptions, fired at Borodino and abandoned during the retreat from Moscow, were not returned to the French by our ancestors. Having trampled the French dream, we then hindered the British one for a long time. Yes, the British also had a dream, to colonize every possible country, populate Africa, the Middle East, South America, the Pacific Islands, the Indonesian archipelago, and the coastlines of China and Japan with their settlers. This dream was cherished by British national icons like Kipling and Cecil Rhodes, who planned to turn the world into dominions subservient to London, envisioning a global order where any conflict or war would become impossible. These gentlemen genuinely believed that one day all civilized nations' problems would be solved by a world parliament with deputies from white English colonies. A beautiful dream? Indeed. But Tsarist Russia hindered England from building this empire, while simultaneously constructing its own empire, where instead of a hierarchical ladder of superior and inferior races, there was a strange order where representatives of diverse peoples, from Poles to Aleuts, became equal citizens of a vast empire. Our behavior during the Crimean War epitomized impropriety. We halted the Anglo-French-Turkish invasion, prevented the dismemberment of Russia, and defeated the British aristocracy's elite on the battlefield. We often believe that we hopelessly lost that war. However, not everyone in the world thought so, and the British withdrawal from Crimea caused many hearts to beat joyfully. Soon, the Sepoy Mutiny began in India, and Burma, which Britain had its eye on, officially requested to join the Russian Empire. Do you think the British found this pleasant? After 1917, we began building something peculiar again, confusing others. And it would have been fine if we had limited ourselves to Mongolia. But our example proved contagious even in Europe, where the communist movement was gaining strength. Soon, the Red Menace compelled the leading Western countries to invest in the rise of fascism. It was an excellent plan, fatten the Nazi monster and unleash it on Russia. Everything went as planned, the world was divided into spheres of influence, and the Teutonic races entered an era of prosperity, wisely dividing their duties to humanity. Americans managed their savages on the Mississippi, the British on the Ganges, Indus, and Niger, and the Germans on the Volga. However, Russia disrupted everything again. By signing the Non-Aggression Pact with Germany in 1939, it drove a wedge between friends and shattered the Anglo-German partnership. This paradoxical situation forced Britain into war with its student and like-minded partner. The Teutonic peoples began to fight each other, even though King Edward VIII had already taught his niece, the future Queen Elizabeth, to salute and shout Heil Hitler. In the Soviet Union, it was bitterly noted that Russian and German workers fought on opposite sides of the front, but everyone seemed to forget that English and German Nazis also ended up on opposite sides. They too shot at each other, and for many, this was also a tragedy. Having quarreled, the Teutonic peoples trampled on Germany's dream of Eastern expansion, and mixed up all of Britain's world division plans. Russia didn't stop there. There was also the bloodless victory over Britain when, thanks to the swift capture of Berlin and brilliant military maneuvers, our command thwarted Winston Churchill's planned Operation Unthinkable. Churchill, embodying the best traits of British politicians, fought like a lion, trying to reforge the Western Front against Russia. Everything was meticulously planned. Britain, the USA, Nazi Germany, Poland, and Hungary in 1945 attacking Russia together to accomplish what Hitler couldn't. This plan also failed. The greatest Britain of all time didn't hysterically demand nuclear bombings of Soviet cities for nothing. Churchill sensed an impending catastrophe. He knew Russia couldn't be left among the victors of World War II. Soon enough, the storm did indeed break. Inspired by the example of non-European and racially inferior Russia, yesterday's savages took up arms and expelled the British from their colonies. Our country actively helped them. We were doing what the British had always considered their exclusive right, intervening in conflicts and defeating the enemy with others' hands. And what about our confrontation with America? Together with China, we halted the US invasion of Korea, supported Washington's enemies in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, and openly assisted Vietnam and Cuba. Right before everyone's eyes, prime pieces of the planet shifted to the socialist camp, directly threatening US interests. And you think the Anglo-Saxons should forget all this? Pretend none of it happened? In our time, America's greatness is threatened just as Britain's once was. The Americans invested immense efforts to achieve global dominance. Year after year, they created the great arc of instability from North Africa to China. The resources, money, and energy invested, the number of influence agents prepared, the conflicts ignited. But again, Russia ruined everything. By sending its air force to help Assad, supporting the legitimate Syrian government, we preserved Syria, a crucial Middle Eastern link in this belt. This was effectively another slap in the face to the US and the collective West, made in full view of the world. More examples can be given, but what has been said is enough. For a long time, we have been on the path of so-called civilized nations and have long been the West's fiercest enemy. It would be the height of naivety to think that the Anglo-Saxons, for example, would forgive us just because Vasily Livanov played Sherlock Holmes well or Boris Zakatar skillfully translated Winnie the Pooh. Let us not be naive. We are enemies of the West and always will be. Let's finally stop being embarrassed by this.